Hi everyone! Since I posted my first Titanic diorama, many people have been asking me to make the Titanic either sinking or breaking in half. But how nice would it be if Titanic didn't sink and all these people didn't die? How nice would it be if Titanic arrived at the port of New York on Wednesday morning on the 17th of April 1912? Well, this is why I made this diorama. In order to make this imaginary scene of the Titanic arriving at the port of New York, I needed the Statue of Liberty, so I printed one with my 3D printer. For the ship I used a model that I know very well. It is the Revell Titanic model at 1:1200 scale. As a base for my diorama, I used a wooden picture frame. I marked the back side of the frame, and this will be my working area, which has dimensions 28.5 to 20 centimeters. I also cut 2 pieces of foam and glued them together in order to create the Liberty Island. I didn't want the foam to melt from the resin, so I covered it with a layer of Mod Podge mixed with grey acrylic color. I also used this concrete acrylic material and some small pebbles to cover the outline of the island. These additional layers are very important, as they will protect the foam even more from the heat of the resin. Then I painted the rest of the base with a dark acrylic color, which will give a sense of depth to the sea. Once all the materials have dried, I created a mold for the resin pouring. I wanted to put the Titanic and another ship inside the resin, so before I proceeded with the resin pouring, I prepared and painted the ships. I also put some small supports from plexiglass under the hull of the Titanic and glued the ship in its place. Then I created the sea with resin. As you can see, this was not a very thick pouring, so I didn't expect any major issues during the curing of the resin, but of course with resin you can never be sure. Whilst the resin was curing, I started creating the other items that I would use for my diorama. So I primed and painted the Statue of Liberty. I also 3D printed and painted a couple of tugboats. This is because I noticed from real footage of the time that the Titanic needed tug assistance in order to exit the port of Southampton. So I thought that she would again need tug assistance in order to enter the port of New York upon arrival. Also, I'm sure that many ships would be at the sea in order to welcome the Titanic at the port of New York. Therefore, I made from polymer clay a bigger ship and some smaller boats. For the bigger ship, I used some leftover parts from previous models. And this is why one has to keep all these parts, because they will come handy at a later stage. When my fleet of tugs and ships were ready, I started creating the sea surface with an acrylic gel. I also finalized the rigging and some further details on the ships. For the rigging of the Titanic, I used thin black wire. I also mixed the acrylic gel that I used for the sea surface with some artificial acrylic snow in order to create the waves and the disturbed water around the Titanic and the two tugs. The next step was to glue the Statue of Liberty in its place and finalize the Liberty Island. But wait a minute. Did the Statue of Liberty in 1912 look exactly the same like it looks today? I always thought that the Statue of Liberty remained the same through the years. But what about its base? After some research on the web, I noticed that the different levels and the stairs did not exist on the base of the statue in 1912, so I will have to use my bandsaw and remove all these levels in order to make a flatter base as it was in 1912. Finally, I managed to cut the parts with my bandsaw. It was a difficult procedure and I didn't avoid making some damages on the base. Thankfully, the statue is intact and the damages can easily be fixed with some epoxy clay. So I used epoxy clay in order to create the base of the statue as it was in 1912 and also to rectify the minor damages. It was difficult to know for sure from the black and white pictures, but I think the statue had a square with grass on its base, so I used PVA glue and some artificial grass to create this square. Also, I used a small piece of foam and styrene to create the stairs leading up to the entrance. Finally, with the same method, I created the grass on the Liberty Island and painted the roads and the paths around the statue with grey acrylic color. Then I painted the torch of the statue with a golden color. I created the tow line between the Titanic and the tug. I used small pieces of cotton in order to create the smoke coming out of the Titanic's and the tug's funnels. I glued the Marconi cables on the Titanic's masts and my diorama was finished. So this is the Titanic entering the port of New York diorama. How fantastic would it be if the accident didn't happen, the people didn't die, and the Titanic entered the port of New York with all of her passengers and all of her glory on the 17th of April 1912. Write me your comments below how you feel about this diorama, if you like it, and if you have ever thought about this scenario. As always, I would like to say a big thank you to all the supporters of my channel. You guys are all awesome. Thank you all so much for watching. Have a great day everyone, and I'll see you again next time. Goodbye.